So to begin, Damon Sauer and Julie Anand, who again isn't here tonight, but Damon will be presenting on their behalf, work together as collaborative artists based up in Phoenix. In the galleries, you can see work from their current project, Ground Truth, Corona Landmarks, in which they photograph the remains of Cold War satellite calibration targets that were part of the first military spy satellite program. To these photographs, they then add a digitally rendered map of satellites orbiting in the sky above the sites at the moment that the photograph was made, gesturing both then towards the history of spy satellites and also towards this massive information network that we're all really a part of. Julie also serves as associate professor within the photography area at the School of Art at Arizona State University, and she's senior sustainability scholar at ASU's Global Institute of Sustainability. And Anand and Sauer are exhibiting their work this year at the Florida State Art Museum, also at the Oregon State University, and coming up next year, they'll have a solo exhibition at the National Academy of Sciences in Washington, D.C. So please help me welcome Damon Sauer.
Thanks, everyone. Bear with me here. I'm just going to dim the lights and bring up some slides. So, yeah, thanks, Kate, for that introduction. That was great. Julie, of course, couldn't make it. She put a lot of time and energy into sort of building this evening, and I know she really wanted to be here. So I'm going to do my best to represent our work alone tonight. What I wanted to talk about tonight is our project, which is in the exhibit. These are images from Ground Truth. There's a lot to get to, and there are sort of several different ways that we like to think about and talk about our work. So it's perhaps a little bit much to get into tonight, but I want to sort of get at some of that. And starting with this idea of kind of, what is invisible to the eye. You can see in the image here and the images that I'll be showing that we have these maps which we're placing in the sky, visualizing this system of satellites that is otherwise invisible to us. And it's perhaps a little difficult to tell from the projection, and I think the experience of the individual images is that way also. It's hard to tell what exactly you're looking at in the sky. A lot of times people misinterpret those marks as either scratches on the images or sort of long exposure motion, like star motion. Which are kind of interesting references that we enjoy, but what our hope is that it kind of invites closer inspection, and that that viewer will be able to kind of understand that map by sort of closing the distance. And so I'll show you in a little bit. I'll zoom in so you can kind of get a better sense of what that looks like, since probably don't want everyone walking up to the screen right now. So that's what's going on in the sky, this map of this invisible territory, I guess. And then on the ground, we're using these calibration marks, which are connected to the first satellite imaging program. And we're thinking about these as kind of sites of observation, sort of predetermined locations where we can place our camera and kind of view both the ground and the sky. And the idea, of course, is to make that connection to this sort of vast system that we all are connected to, daily or by the minute, and yet is kind of unseen or is unregarded in our sort of normal daily life. So again, there's so these marks are really, the X marks, the calibration marks on the ground are connected to this really rich history, which is, again, a lot to get into. So I'm going to kind of leave that part mostly alone, but it's still, I think, important to kind of understand some aspects of the context. So, you know, sort of over several years, we sort of uncovered or found out about this system, this grid, which I'll overlay here. You can zoom in. This is in the area around Casa Grande, and as I said, over a few years, we kind of uncovered this grid that was used in connection to the satellite program. And the grid is every mile there's a marker that's placed. And so over time, we've kind of done some research and digging using satellite images, old aerial images, and ultimately we've been able to identify somewhere around like 90% of what we assume were originally 273 marks. And so we have either, you know, images that show the marks are still there now currently, or we have excuse me, or we have some document, historic satellite image or aerial photograph that shows where it once was if it is no longer visible. So I don't know if you can make it out, but there are little white dots at those intersections. Those are the marks highlighted at their actual scale, but it's hard to make out. So so we've enlarged them here. This is like 12 times the size. So so you see, we've been able to locate most of them. There are a couple spots that are missing, which again, those are, we presume there were originally marks that existed there, but we just haven't been able to document any evidence of that mark. So this is kind of the field. Oops. Well, anyway, this is kind of the field that we're working in. This is a Google Earth image that shows the shows 1 square mile here and highlights the mark, so you can kind of get a sense of what the relationship is. But certainly from satellite images, but I think it's true also for the flat photographs that we make. It's pretty challenging to kind of get a sense of what the experience is to visit one of these marks. So I included here a video. This is, if it plays. There we go. So just some amateur drone work. Beth and John came out to meet us and to visit a couple of these sites. So again, I just want to include this because it gives you a sense of the scale of these marks to begin with, but also hopefully a little bit of the kind of experience of being in these spaces. They're really massive marks. They're in some ways unremarkable shapes, but it's really, I think, kind of an impressive, I mean, the scale is so monumental that it's really kind of impressive to visit these sites. I still feel that way, even though we've been doing this for past several years. So we're zooming into the center here, somewhat inartfully, but as it finishes here, I'll advance to the next slide, which shows you what is at the center of each of these marks. Each of these marks have a designation that shows sort of where they are or indicates where they are on the grid, both rows and columns. This is AF49, which you can see on the top half. It also has the year that they were built. All the ones that we found were made between 1966 and 68. And you can see that they were also built by the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's really, when you visit these, that's really all you have to go on. There's no, no indication of where, of what these marks are. They're just kind of unexplained in the landscape. And so, I mean, that sort of mystery, I think, is part of what we're drawn to. you'll notice that we're obviously using this vertical format. We, in many ways, are kind of thinking about these spaces as landscapes, but we're not using the landscape format. We're using the vertical format. And when we started making this work, actually, we were making landscape images. We decided to rotate the frame and use this vertical format. And our sort of rationale there is to privilege the sky, literally. I mean, more of the image is sky than ground, and we want that sort of implication, that sort of sense of openness in the sky. Ultimately, of course, we're overlaying these maps which show the satellites, but that sort of, it's almost kind of thinking of it as a dialogue, that dialogue between the mark, the calibration mark and the sky is really important. And I think, also, kind of opportunity for beauty as well. So, I mentioned before it's a little difficult to make out these marks. Hopefully, you can see it a little bit better here when we zoom in. So this is just what one of these sort of maps, we talk about them as maps, what these look like. They're the line indicating the orbit, there's a little dot indicating the position, and then there's a name, which in the prints, if you haven't seen them, the size of the text is sort of just big enough to make out, but we really want you to have to sort of get close and inspect both aspects, inspect that map in the sky and also the ground. This is AF49 for whatever that's worth, but this is actually the first site that we visited. It was actually a time where we thought there was only one mark in the desert, and it was just kind of a curiosity that we wanted to check out. So this isn't the image that we made, but it is the first location that we visited. And we make these with sort of high resolution sensor, which allows us to capture a lot of detail in the photographic side, and so again, that kind of reinforces this experience of kind of seeing him from a distance, but also sort of being able to inspect the image and make relationships between the sky, the satellites, and the photographic detail. And the grid is really sort of rich for us. It sort of implies this sort of archaeological way of looking, which is this kind of methodic and sort of standardized approach, which forces us as photographers into these specific sites, right? I mean, you see we're changing our camera position relative to the mark, but we're at the same elevation and same distance from the center. And of course, in terms of that grid, we're always sort of located at that mile mark. And so that reference of archaeology is really important because it's a kind of systematic way of looking at the way that the land is being used, the way things have changed. This is just a really quick video to show sort of what the process looks like, although we actually kind of changed it a little bit, but the idea is, like I said, the camera's up on 16 feet above the ground, and we're bringing a computer out into the field. The photography, though, is actually probably the easiest part of this, because once that work is done, we end up spending what ends up being, sort of weeks basically compiling, first of all, dealing with the images, but then building these maps. So this is a process video, which is on our website if you're interested, but just kind of showing, we're actually blending multiple images so that we can be sure to have really high resolution, like I said, that rich detail that we want from the photograph. And then we're using information, the coordinates and the compass angle at the time that we're photographing, using all of that to essentially plot all of the satellites that were in the sky at that vantage point at that time, and sort of slowly building the map. So each map kind of, along with the photographs, sort of is a kind of unique fingerprint. And again, that idea of this kind of methodic way of looking at the landscape is really important, and we really embrace the way that it sort of puts us in all these different kinds of contexts. There's like agricultural context, there's this almost kind of suburban context, there's these kind of like rich industrial or technologic spaces. And it's a changing landscape too. This transmission line was being built as we were photographing in the area. So you can see this is really complicated because not only do you have the satellite map, but you have the power lines running through the image as well. So it just gets really, really sort of intense in terms of those linear elements. But I wanted to draw attention to that because in the next image here, this is that same transmission line. They had just put up the towers, but those the power lines hadn't been connected yet. So it's been interesting to kind of see the way that all this stuff changes. One of the ways we think about this work is as using these marks as kind of opportunities, as kind of observatories for the sky, where we really enjoy the way we're essentially kind of reversing the relationship, right? These marks were made in order to be seen by the satellites, from the sky, but instead we're photographing from the ground, looking up at the sky and sort of plotting those marks. So we really enjoy kind of thinking about them that way. And we use, and so that idea of being on the ground is really important. That's the title that we use for this project is Ground Truth. And that's a term that is used in a few different ways, but comes from remote sensing to describe that kind of that direct measurement that you make on the ground. So again, a kind of different context here, a rare overcast sky. We sort of rushed out to try to make a photograph because really I think this is one of the only opportunities we would have had to make an image like this. But it also required us, and there are a few other images that have done this as well, required us to inverse our convention so that we're actually using these dark marks on the light sky. So given the context, we have like several different sort of standard approaches in terms of what those marks look like. So hopefully I'm not making anyone sick with all the panning and zooming. It's the last one. So anyway, this is, again, I just kind of want to move through some of the broad points and give you a sense of some of what we're thinking about. I thought we could end with some of maybe the broadest way that we're thinking about the work that we're making, and that is as metaphoric. Part of what we really respond to and sort of end up thinking about is the way that these marks, they're these literal X's, right, in the ground, X marking the spot, that they almost are anthropomorphic in the sense that, they're identifying a fixed, solitary position on Earth, right, a fixed perspective. And from that kind of, they're pointing upward, looking upward, and trying to sort of, relate to or infer something about that sky. And we, as humans, we've been kind of making these star maps for quite some time, right? We've been trying to sort of make maps to relate to the unknown, and we, so we kind of like see this work as a kind of reference or reflection of that process. So I'll leave things there. Again, we have a website where you can see all of our images, of course, but there's also a map if you're interested in kind of exploring this a little bit. We made a map that interactive map that lets you kind of move around the area that we're photographing, and you can access either the images that we've made at a location, or you can see some of the, in terms of the research, the historic satellite images or the aerial images that we were able to find for these locations. So I'm going to switch over here to Beth's presentation.
Thank you, Damon.